All right. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to come and share. We're going to be talking a little bit about this topic, rising above mediocrity. Just by way of introduction, Ava already covered some of what I was going to share, but I'll quickly introduce myself so that you know a little bit about my background in general. I am a homeschooled dad. As Ava mentioned, Sue and I, it's my wife Sue in the back row here. We homeschooled for 21 years, and we have 5 adult children now. 17 grandchildren, actually. We've got another one on the way. And so nowadays, we spend our time teaching, coaching, small group fellowship, and visiting our kids and grandkids primarily. Some of my interests, as Ava mentioned, are reading and writing. I just started writing this last year, and I'm learning how to write. I like sharing ideas. I like teaching and coaching. And I've worked at different jobs. I have a bit of a checkered past. All of us do to some degree, but mine may be more than others, and I'll go over some of that. I've worked as a trampoline instructor, a groundskeeper, mechanic, radar operator in the Navy. I went through special warfare training when I was in the Navy. I've been a diving coach for age group divers and at the college level. And then I did work as a professional high diver for several seasons down at Six Flags. But primarily my work has been as an optometrist. So I do eye examinations. I've been doing that for 40 years. So I'm the guy who does the which is better, 1 or 2. And it's been a good job for me. I wanted to share with you just briefly, I want to share a little bit about my background because I think there's a lesson there that maybe you can learn from and you can avoid some of the mistakes maybe that I made when I was your age. The class, let me ask this, who has read the Do Hard Things book? Anybody? Okay. So the message is really taken from that book. It's the book by the Harris twins. I'm going to show you a 2-minute video just so you can get a feel for that book. But the Do Hard Things book really focuses on an intention and a choice to pursue growth and to become the best person that you can be and what that means. And the theme verse for that from that book is from 1 Timothy 4:12, which I noticed on your website, actually, the Teen Eagle site. And Paul says, "Let no one despise your youth, but be an example to the believers in word, in conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, in purity." Be an example. And so, why did I teach the Pillar class using this book? I've done it for 15 years now. And it's interesting how that came about. Every year, I try to put together a book list, things that I would like to read. And I pull those titles from a couple different sources. Quite often, I'll call someone that I respect who reads good books, and I'll ask them, "Well, have you read any good books lately?" And I did this years ago. A friend of mine, Tom McKnight, told me, "Yeah, we've been going through a book by Alex and Brett Harris called Do Hard Things." So I got the book, I previewed it, and decided to go through it with my kids. I had 3 boys at home at that time. And so I typed up questions, discussion questions for each chapter, and we started to go through that book together. Well, then another family found out what we were doing, and they sent some of their kids over to the house, and then we had a group of about, 6 or 8 young, teenagers going through this book together. And then the following year, I had talked to Mike Cordner about it, and we started up a class down here, and that's how that all got started. But the reason, the motivation, for doing the class and for going through that book is that I realized that book focused on some things that I really could have benefited from when I was 15 years old. And I didn't know better. And I didn't look ahead and I didn't prepare, and it cost me later. I had to play catch up later because I was unprepared when I hit my 20s. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. I'm going to show you, let me just show you a couple things here, just by way of introduction. Here's my wife, Sue. She's a little livelier than I am. We've been married for 45 years almost. And these are our kids. I thought this is an interesting photo because it's about 15 to 20 years between the two photos, and you can see the height of the kids has reversed. They're still in the same they're still in the same order, but our oldest is our daughter Carrie. She just turned 40. I'm 70 now, so I got 30 years on her. This is our oldest son David, then John, Peter, and Mark. Mark is the only one that lives in town now. He's got two little boys. They live in O'Fallon. The rest of our kids are spread out across the country, so we have to travel a bit to see their families. Here's a picture of 4 of our grandsons. I'm showing them the steam engine. That's a hot item for grandkids right there. This is our oldest grandchild. He is, how old is he now, 15?
He will be 15 in 2 weeks.
Yeah, so this goes back a few years, but this was his first eye exam. And that's kind of what I do for work, my primary work. I only work 1 day a week now as an optometrist. I go in on Saturdays. That's about enough for me, because my joints have gotten a little stiff after so many years of rolling around on that stool. But that has been my primary work. I have done some mission work like Ava mentioned. This was taken in Africa about 12 or 14 years ago. Zulu patients in an area near Durban, Africa. Very interesting clinic. I threw this in there just as an interesting tidbit. This is one of the patients I saw in South Africa. And when he came up to my table, I was reviewing his paperwork, and I noticed his date of birth was 1903. This guy's 108 years old. I was there in 2011. 108 years old. He experienced South Africa and all the changes that went on throughout almost the entire 20th century. Very interesting guy, Zulu guy, really dignified elder in his village, for the country. Here's a picture from the high diving show. We used to do it. We did all sorts of things. That was one of them. This is a picture from when I was in the service. So here I am at about 22 years old. And I had great potential, but my character development was incomplete. And I had shaky foundations, and it cost me. I got into trouble in the military. I'll go over a little bit of that, but eventually it led me to the Lord, and personal reformation began. So this is my oldest son. We like to motorcycle. This is in the Smoky Mountains a year or two ago. But it's been fun. I restore old motorcycles. His bike there is 50 years old, the one on the left. And then that Harley in the back is about 30 years old now, or over 30 years old. And it's something that we enjoy to do. I put this picture in just because it kind of relates to the topic, rising above. This is a picture of a hang glider at Torrey Pines in California. And if you're ever in San Diego, that's worth seeing. Torrey Pines is an area where they have a glider port, and you can go up and watch these guys just glide over the coast, over the surf zone below. And it's pretty inspiring. So I want to show you this video, 2 minutes, about the Do Hard Things book.
Well, the book is called Do Hard Things, a teenage rebellion against low expectations. And that really does sum up the message. We're calling young people to rethink the teen years. Right now our society views them more as a vacation from responsibility than as what they really are, the launching pad of life. If you look around in society today, you see low expectations for young people in almost every area. We're expected to be immature, irresponsible, and rebellious just because we're teenagers, for no other reason than that we fall between the ages of 13 and 19 years old. I think that is ridiculous. And that's the myth of adolescence. So many young people today are out there saying, is this all there is? You know, is this all the teen years are about? Is this all that I can accomplish? Is this my potential? And the answer really is no, it's not. So when we wrote the book, really just to say, this is possible. There is an alternative. There is a better, bigger, more exciting, fulfilling way to live. And it starts with being willing to step outside your comfort zone and trust God enough to do hard things. The theme verse of the revolution is 1 Timothy 4, verse 12. And that's where Paul is writing to Timothy, and he says, Timothy, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young. And a lot of people know that part of the verse, and they like that part. It's a little rebellious. Hey, don't look down on me just because I'm a young person. But the key part of that verse is actually the second half, where it says, but set an example for the believers in speech, in life, in love, in faith, in purity. Basically in every area of life. The stories that we're hearing right now are just the beginning of entire lifetimes that are going to be shaped by this mentality that if I do hard things, if I challenge myself, I'm going to keep growing. So while the world, while others might look down on us because we're young, God calls us to be exemplary. And who knows how far that will take a young person. Who knows who we'll be reading about in the history books 50 years from now.
So if you haven't read the book, that's a little preview, and those books are available out front. It's a fun read. It's really written for young people. And these guys, they're older now, of course, but very articulate. And I think they're a great example for, I think they were 18 years old when they put this thing together. You know, we went to a conference that they had at Rock Church. And I don't think I've heard more articulate young people in my life, really. I mean, really focused. And it's just an example of excellence. So, something to consider. So I wanted to say the book puts an emphasis on 3 things. Character, competence, the ability to do things well, and collaboration or teamwork. And let me say this, you don't have to take notes. I've got notes printed. I'm going to give you a copy, so if we don't hit everything in this time that we have together, you'll have a complete copy of my notes, so don't feel like you have to notate. Our culture focuses on skills, competence. That's really what the culture is focused on. Performance, skills, education, competence. There's been a de-emphasis on character development. Character. True heart. And that's what I want to focus on today, because the character, the moral character, the core values can be developed just like the competencies can, but it's trickier. It's not right out in the open where it can be seen so easily. So I want to focus on character development with this message. Just a brief testimony, my background. I was a wild card of a kid, pretty much. I was pretty hyper. I was bright, but I was mischievous. I had to be harnessed when I was a youngster. At about 4 years old, they had me in a harness, leashed up because I kept escaping from the house, you know. And I was just a kind of a freewheeler kid. I had great potential, but I had poor character development. I didn't really have a sense of identity or direction or moral development, and so I often chose to do my own thing, my own way. I compromise, I coast. I had a fear of failure. I didn't want to look foolish in front of other people. So one of my biggest concerns was preserving my own reputation, getting affirmation and recognition and that kind of thing. And I'd do whatever I thought I needed to do to get that. So I spent an awful lot of time just pursuing self-interests, amusements, the easy way, not really looking ahead or preparing for the future. I took the low road. The one area where I was pretty disciplined was I was physically fit. I was a pretty good athlete, and by the time I got to 9th grade, I had a good friend in high school. We used to train together, and we were very fit. And so I had this element of discipline in my life, physically, and then I had this deficit in my life in terms of moral development and character. So what happened with that, this friend of mine, his dad, I'm going to make this brief, but it's important. His dad was the first adult I ever met who was really excited about Jesus Christ. He was an on-fire believer. And this guy kind of had a heart for me because I was a wayward, he knew I had potential, but I was off track, you know. And there was a time we were talking in his little workshop in the basement. I was with my friend, and this older gentleman was there. He's my dad's age. And he said, well, Jim, can I pray for you? You know, I thought he meant he was going to pray for me later during his prayer time, you know. And I said, sure, you can pray for me. He said, well, come on over here and sit in this chair. I thought, oh, no. So he had me sit down in this chair. And my buddy says, hey, I'll see you. I'm going to go upstairs. And he left. And so his dad and another gentleman from the same fellowship, they laid hands on me. And they didn't lead me in a sinner's prayer. They didn't coerce me or anything like that. They basically just prayed a blessing over me. And they prayed that I would find the Lord along the way, and that I would come to know Him. That was about it. And then they released me. And I didn't think much of that, but I never forgot it. You know, that was a seed that was planted. Well, I went off to college at my parents' insistence, and I was in college for 2 years. My semester GPA was a 3.5, 3.0, 2.5, 2.0, 0.9. So the last semester I just flunked out of college. And I went home and my dad said, well, he didn't know what to do with me then. He said, you've got 3 weeks to get full-time work or you're out of here. And so the next day, I went down to the recruiting office and I enlisted in the Navy. And I went off to the Navy. So I got to boot camp, and they recognized pretty quickly that I was fit and that I was good in the water. And the guy at the pool was a UDT member, underwater demo team guy. And he recommended that I take the screening test for special warfare, UDT SEAL team, which I did, and I passed pretty easily. And then he put me in charge of what was called the FAT squad on base. And these were the recruits who couldn't pass their run and their physical, their PT requirements. So I was kind of in charge of running these guys each day, helping them pass. And it kept me fit while I was there. And I had this great opportunity put right in front of me to go to BUDS training, which is the basic underwater demo SEAL team. So I ended up going to BUDS. And all of a sudden I had direction, I had some purpose, I was physically able, I was physically fit, but I still had a deficient foundation from a character standpoint. And I was the last guy who got dropped from my class. We started with 102 people, 15 graduated. I had 3 weeks to graduate. I was there, you know, it's a 6-month program. I was there for 23 weeks. And then 3 weeks before graduation, I failed a couple of water tests. I demonstrated some untrustworthiness. I didn't stay on task. I got distracted. I was more concerned with the beach and the girls and my car and driving around, and I got off track, and all of a sudden I was out. And it was the biggest disappointment of my life at that time. I failed. But what that did was it showed me that if I continued doing things my own way on that course, it was going to be one failure after another. I had some things that needed to change and develop. So I tell that story because I squandered my teen years when I could have really been preparing myself in different ways, and it would have set me up for success when I got into my 20s, and I didn't do it. So the thrust of this message really is that we're all being formed. We're all changing. From day to day, we're being formed. The question is, well, what kind of person are we going to become? What kind of person will we become? And do we have any control over that? What's our part? What can we do to make a difference? I want you to consider the passage about sowing and reaping from Galatians. You've heard it before. Paul says, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap." You can think of this in practical terms. Think about an unhealthy diet. If you eat junky food long enough, eventually it will manifest. Is that true? If you plant bad seeds in your garden, in your heart, long enough, eventually it's going to play out and there'll be a price to pay. You will reap what you sow. That's what happened to me. I didn't think I was sowing bad seed. But sometimes when we do nothing, it seems like we're not sowing, we're sowing. The seed's still going down. So we have a choice to make and a part to play in this. And these are choices that we make every day. They're basically opportunities to invest in ourselves so that we'll have strength for the years that lie ahead. And we can increase value. This is a great quote. It's by Ronald Reagan, but it's one of my favorites, and I wanted to share it. Ronald Reagan said this regarding character and the choices that we make. He said, "The character that takes command in moments of crucial choices has already been determined. It's been determined by 1,000 other choices made earlier in seemingly unimportant moments. It's been determined by all the little choices of years past, all those times when the voice of conscience was at war with the voice of temptation, whispering the lie that it doesn't really matter. It's been determined by all the day-to-day decisions made when life seemed easy and crisis seemed far away. The decisions that piece by piece, bit by bit, developed habits of discipline or of laziness, habits of self-sacrifice or self-indulgence, habits of duty and honor and integrity or dishonor and shame." And it's really true. These small choices, faithfulness or unfaithfulness in small things, it sets the stage for things later. And that was the mistake I made. I think I took all that for granted, and I focused on outward performance, and I developed some competency and some strength outwardly, but the core, the inner foundation was weak. And there are hurdles, there are pressures that we face. You know the verse from Romans 12. Paul talks about not being conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? That you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. The Phillips version of that verse is really good. It says this: "Don't let the world push you into its mold," because there's pressure. There's pressure. The culture will put pressure on you to push you into a box or a mold that it thinks is appropriate for you. So you're the one that chooses. The world system focuses on the outward man. Things like appearance, wealth, status, power, performance. Some of those are good things. I mean, it's good to be an excellent performer in what you do. But if that becomes your identity, it can become an idol. And the natural mind is really drawn to this. Has anybody read Tim Keller, any of Tim Keller's books? Okay, good book. I've got a book list for you. It's not required reading. They're recommended books, okay? They meant something to me. Tim Keller did a book called Counterfeit Gods. It's really it's a good book. And what he does is he identifies things in our culture that have ensnared people in different ways. The chapter that really spoke to me was all about achievement, success, and performance. It can be an idol. So that when you're performing well, you feel like you're on top of the world, and when you're not, you feel like a big fat failure. And so it's kind of a roller coaster ride. And of all people he quotes in that chapter, he quotes Madonna, which I thought was interesting. I don't usually quote Madonna, but I will in this case. I'm paraphrasing. Basically, she was so honest in this interview where she talked about, she basically lived from one performance to another because she had to have that spotlight and performance to validate herself, her worth. Her value was all based in her performance from stage to stage. And in between, she had a desperate fear of being mediocre or substandard. But that's the world. It's the wrong perspective. The world looks on the outer man. What does the Lord look on? The heart. The Lord looks on the heart. And that's really underplayed. What we think, we look at people, unfortunately, we judge people often by the outward appearance. We don't know how strong they are inside, though, or weak. I meet people at work. I'll have old folks come in, even older than me. You don't know who you're talking to. They could be an ex-Olympian. They could be, they could have been part of the Second World War. I don't see too many World War II veterans now, but I've met people who've been through unbelievable things, and you'd never know it by looking at them. But their heart, they've got strength there that doesn't come any other way. They've been over the hard road. So as a preface, I want you to consider these presuppositions. These are some truths. I'm a believer, and these are some truths that I think are important, and I want you to consider what I have to say in light of these things. First of all, God exists. Hebrews 11:6 talks about this. We've got to believe, as a believer, we've got to believe that God exists and that He's a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. That's an important truth. We've got to believe that His desire is that we might be conformed to the character or the image of His Son. He wants that for us. And that He's willing to open up our eyes and then guide us and reform us, sanctify us, bring us to that place. So the fact is, we can be changed from the inside to the outside. That's what integrity is really all about. That what we express on the outside is an accurate reflection of our heart. That's a good goal. And that's a goal that I continue to pray about. I'm still growing, but I want to continue pursuing that as long as I can. So here's an example. You've got physical training. You've got skills, competencies, knowledge can be increased. All these things can be strengthened. How many of you already practice a skill of some sort? Music, sport activity, language skills. There are all sorts of things you may be developing, and they require drill, practice, application, work, devotion to do that. Well, the integrity can be strengthened the same way. The core values, the inner self can be strengthened. Here's a good book also. It's called Ordering My Private World. It's by Gordon MacDonald. Here's a quote. I thought it was so good. He says, "If my private world is in order, it will be because I'm convinced that the inner world of the spiritual must govern the outer world of activity." That's a good perspective. Inside-out living, really. Principle-based living. So the question that I want you to consider is this: what kind of person do you desire to become? Or have you thought about it? I never thought about it. I'm asking you because when I was 15 or 16 years old, I didn't look much further ahead than a week at a time. But do you have an end in mind? It's important. Is it vague or is it clear? Do you have some clear direction? If you can see it, and you may not see all the details, but if you can see the direction you want to go to some degree, you'll move that way. It helps you. It helps you commit. It helps you to apply yourself. It helps you to train. So regarding direction, here's a good quote. Our plans miscarry because they have no aim. When a man does not know what harbor he's making for, no wind is the right wind. That's Seneca. So let me ask you this question. If you could change, this is a good exercise, and it's not, in the class that I teach, these are the kind of questions that a lot of students will balk on because they go inside. It's personal application, reflection, and a lot of people don't want to go there because it's hard. And the question is, if you could change one thing about yourself, one aspect of your personality or your character, what would it be? One thing. Think about that. What do you think some of the common answers are? Give me one. What's one thing people would like to change?
Quick temper.
Exactly, that's one of them. Anger issues. What's another one?
Public speaking and social interaction.
That's good. That has to do with fear of rejection, fear of failure, getting out in front of people. Procrastination, that's another one. Impatience, that's another one. What else? Yeah, that's it, fear of failure. So I want you to think about character attributes, things that you desire for yourself, maybe in areas where you realize you're weak. You've got a weak area. Everybody's got different weaknesses, and everybody's got different strengths. I think it's good to recognize both. And when people point out a strength in you, don't blow that off. I would listen to that, because that, quite often, that's how the Lord identifies a gift or strength in you, so that you can begin to run in that thing. So, character attributes. I often list, I got online and looked at what are employers looking for? What attributes are employers looking for in a teenage hire, somebody that they're hiring? If you have a group of 10, 3 or 4 of them will probably be competencies. Ability to use the language and communicate. Attention to detail. Those aren't character issues so much, they're competencies. What do you think the character attributes are that an employer looks for? What's one of them?
Honesty.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Trustworthiness, honesty. That's got to come right up at the top. What else?
Hardworking.
Yeah, work ethic. That's a character attribute. Humility. The ability to submit to delegated authority. That's a big one. But these are all things to think about. These are the things that they're looking for. And God desires the same things, really. Faithfulness, trustworthiness. Can we be trusted with the small things in order to receive larger things to manage or walk out or lead? Here's a quote by Keith Phillips. Keith Phillips is the guy that started up World Impact. My memory isn't what it should be. Keith Phillips was a visionary. And something he said that I think is so important. If you get anything out of this message, this is it, I think. He said this: perhaps the most difficult hurdle, and he was speaking to young people just like you, perhaps the most difficult hurdle you will face is to really believe that your character is more important than your skills and abilities. This is foreign to the world. And he was right. It is. It's foreign to the culture. You can develop skills. abilities, knowledge base. Character, if it's there first, everything else falls into place as it should. Does that make sense? I had it backwards. I discounted the character element, and it cost me. So that's kind of, I wanted to set the stage with that. So I want to ask this question and put this out there. What would I do differently? I just wrote a story for my grandkids. Advice for my grandkids. It was an assigned topic. My daughter sent it to me. What advice would you give for your grandkids? Well, you know, off the top of my head, you think of things like, well, you want to avoid drugs and alcohol, promiscuity, gambling, don't assume too much debt, things like that. But that's not what I wanted to focus on. I wanted to focus on what I think are good investments. What are some things that I invested in that were redemptive and paid off over time? What are some things I wish I would have invested in when I was 15 or 16 years old? And that's what I wanted to touch on here. For the first one is just what I said about clarifying an end in mind. And sometimes it's difficult. I assign this as a question in my class, and most people have trouble looking ahead 5 or 10 years. It's difficult. They got a general idea, you know, they know what they don't want to happen, but it's difficult to really label what they would like it to look like. So I think it's a good exercise. And so I would encourage you to think about what you would like to be remembered for at the end of the journey. You could write your own eulogy. You know, what do you want people to remember about you? Were you kind? Were you honest? Were you a hard worker? Were you loyal as a friend? You know, these kinds of things. I gave that assignment, and I'll give you some of the top answers. These were desirable life attributes people wanted to be remembered for. Helpfulness, servanthood. That's a good goal, servanthood. Compassionate, caring, kind. Diligent and dependable. Faithfulness, trustworthiness. That's a huge attribute. Courage, boldness, willing to stand for what's right and true. Wisdom, understanding, sensible. Work ethic, it's already been mentioned. Joyful, positive attitude. That's worth pursuing. My wife is like that. I'm not like that naturally. I tend to be cynical and kind of pessimistic. But God's slowly changing me by partnering me up with somebody who's positive and joyful. It helps. Humility. So when you think about these things, I would encourage you to think about what Paul has to say about the mind of Christ, Philippians 2. Putting the interests of others before your own. Servanthood and humility. The fruit of the Spirit would be another one from Galatians 5. You know, these are things that we should desire and pray about. I think they're underrated. A lot of people want these things, but they don't really think much about them, you know. So I would start with just like three character attributes that you'd like to be remembered for, and write them down. I would recommend keeping a journal and pray about those things. I'd like to move that direction. And as time goes on, you can begin to specify more and more and more. The second thing is that if I could go back and do it over again, I would make time for Bible reading and prayer. I wish I had done that when I was your age. If I had taken time each day to spend in the Word, it would have kept me from running so recklessly and foolishly as a young man, I think. It would have preserved me. It kept me out of... I would not have suffered so many things that I did just because of foolishness. But I would recommend you saturate your mind with Scripture, ponder it. You know, it's been said as you read your Bible, it reads you. It's living, active. It's a discerner of the heart. And it also, in reading the Bible, Paul Jaley used to talk about this. He was a Christian Christian school headmaster and pastor. Regarding Christian education, when we read the Bible, it cuts pathways in our mind. It's like plowing the field, but we're plowing the field in alignment with the will of God, so that when the Holy Spirit or the Lord prompts us or leads us, our mind is already prepared to some degree to embrace what's right. Does that make sense? The culture and the world are going to plow our mind in a different direction. And it makes things more difficult in terms of character development and moral growth. And it nourishes the soul and the spirit. And then to go along with that, I would say, I wish I had sought the Lord. Seek the Lord. Trust in Him and ask. I was 23 years old before I became a believer. And then I began to ask for help. And He helped me. He began to direct. He gave me some direction. Then He provided an encouraging partner. Then I went back to school. And I had to explain my transcripts to this school of optometry. I interviewed at the school of optometry, and they've got my new grades, which were good. I went back to school and kept about a 3.5 average. But then they looked at 4 years before I was in the military, they said, what happened? And I said, well, I just didn't want to be there, and I just quit, And thankfully, I think God protected me. I remember the admissions board was looking at, they were kind of grinning, it was kind of funny because I had these scores. And they said, well, the good thing is we look at the trend, and the trend of your grades looks pretty good. And because you're a veteran, that helps too. So I got into school. It was a miracle, really. I'd never get in today, but it was a new school then. But God was giving me a chance to reboot, start over, and go again. So anyway, I would seek Him, ask, trust in the Lord, Don't lean on your own understanding so much. Trust in the Lord and acknowledge Him, and He'll direct you. Direction. Third thing is, I'd invest time in fellowship with good friends and team efforts. I wish I had done more team activities. When I was younger, I didn't play team sports. I didn't really get involved with team activities. Those things build character because you have to give up a little bit of yourself in order to work with others. It also humbles you when you work with people that are stronger than you. And there's a great value in mixing it up with good people. When I say good friends, I mean this. Look for friends that bring out the best in you. That's your best friend. The ones that bring out the best in you. They encourage you to be the best person you can be. You can celebrate with them. You can grieve with them. You can be genuine with them. It's worth a lot. Number 4, read good books. I would encourage you to read. If you're not naturally gifted as a reader, you can develop that. But there's something about reading. I know we can learn online. We can learn a lot just by watching educational clips. But there's something about the exercise of reading and sorting it out in your own head, and maybe even journaling it and writing it, making it your own, that develops character and strength that doesn't come in other ways. And a good quote regarding reading I really like is this one. I will be much the same 1 year from today, except for the books that I read and the people that I meet. I think that's true. The books that I read and the people that I meet. So you got to choose the books carefully, just like you would choose your friends, because there's a lot of garbage out there, you know that. And to go along with that, it helps expand your horizons. I would recommend looking at material that's outside your own culture. Go back. Read the classics. It's like getting a breath of fresh air from another culture. It's like listening to music from another time. When other convictions and principles really rule the way people thought. And it broadens the way you think. book lists, I'm going to give you, like I said, this book list, but I would recommend that every year, even if you only read one book a month or whatever it amounts to, talk to people that you respect and ask them, do you recommend any good books? If you read a good book, look at the bibliography and see what the sources are. And you'll pick up related works that will build you up the same way. Number 5, and this is an important one. Pursue training with the experienced. Run with stronger people. Even if it makes you look awkward and foolish, it will stretch you. And so I would say choose to do what's hard for you and train up. And what I mean by that is you'll be the small guy, the small fish, the one behind, but you'll be the one that's growing. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So in pursuing growth, I think it's so important to spend time with stronger people. Just in terms of a physical example, our oldest son used to wrestle when he was little, age group wrestling, and he was a little guy. He started when he weighed 36 pounds. So anyway, he got to be around 75 pounds. Well, we used to have him wrestle up. And so we would enter him in tournaments where he would wrestle 80 and 85 pounders, and he'd get horsed around. I mean, it was hard. But after he did that several times, he'd come back to his weight class and dominate. Does that make sense? Because he'd been there, done that. And I think it's a good example. You know, when you stretch yourself and make it hard, and maybe even look foolish doing it, you're going to come out the other side of that stronger. And that's a good way to view failure. You know, failure can really produce growth if it's viewed in a healthy way. And then the last thing I would say, I want to finish up, be responsible for yourself. Embrace responsibility. Don't make excuses for weaknesses. Don't blame other people when you don't measure up. If you don't do the work, make it right. If something's out of order and you know it's out of order in you or your life, fix it. If it's too big to fix, break it down into little steps and just fix it one little step at a time. Does that make sense? I'm going to play it. It's kind of a harsh video, but I'm going to play it anyway because I thought it was good. Who knows who Jordan Peterson is? Have you seen? Okay, so you've seen Jordan Peterson. I don't agree with everything he says. I don't agree with his doctrine all the way. But I think he makes a point here. It's a PragerU clip. He did a little piece for Prager. And I think he makes a good point here. I feel like I'm kind of preaching to the band because you guys are just being here demonstrates some pursuit of growth. I would never do what you're doing when I was your age. I would be wasting time somewhere. But I want you to listen to what Jordan Peterson has to say. I got to boot this back up again real quick. And we'll finish with this.
You can't change other people, but you can change yourself. But it's difficult. It takes courage to change, and it takes discipline. It's much easier and much more gratifying to your basest desires to blame someone else for your misery. Consider the youthful activist making a statement against the corrupt capitalist system by smashing in the storefront of a local business. What has he done other than to bring harm to people who have nothing to do with his real problems? The guilt, doubt, and shame he will inevitably feel in consequence will have to be suppressed so his beliefs can remain unchanged. And that suppression will do nothing but foster his anger and alienation. In the play The Cocktail Party by American English poet T.S. Eliot, one of the characters is having a very hard time of it. She speaks of her profound unhappiness to her psychiatrist. She tells him that she hopes her suffering is all her own fault. Taken aback, the psychiatrist asks why. Because, she tells him, if it's her fault, she can do something about it. If it's in the nature of the world, however, she's doomed. She can't change everything else, but she could change herself. Now, there are people who seem to be consigned to a terrible fate, but most of us aren't. Most of us have a chance to make our lives better. But how? Start small. Ask yourself a few questions. Have you taken full advantage of the opportunities offered to you? Are you working to your fullest capacity at school or at work? Have you, in other words, set your own house in order? If the answer is no, try this. Stop doing what you know to be wrong. Stop today. Don't waste time asking how you know that what you're doing is wrong. Inopportune questioning can confuse without enlightening and deflect you from action. You can know something is right or wrong without knowing why. Start paying attention. Do you procrastinate, show up late, spend money you don't have, and drink more than you should? It's not a matter of accepting some externally imposed morality. It's a dialogue with your own conscience. What are you doing that's wrong from your own perspective? What could you put right now? Get to work on time. Stop interrupting people. Make peace with your siblings and your parents. Diligently utilize everything you already have at hand. If you do those things, your life will improve. You'll become more peaceful, productive, and desirable. After some days or weeks or months of attentive effort, your mind will clear. Your life will become less tragic, and you'll become more confident. You'll start seeing right from wrong more clearly. The path in front of you will shine more brightly. You'll stop getting in your own way. Instead of bringing trouble to yourself, your family, and your society, you'll be a positive and reliable force. Your life will still be difficult. You'll still suffer. That's the price of being alive. But maybe you'll become strong enough to accept that burden, and in that fashion, even come to act nobly and with purpose. The proper way to fix the world isn't to fix the world. There's no reason to assume that you're even up to such a task. But you can fix yourself. You'll do no one any harm by doing so. And in that manner, at least, you will make the world a better place. I'm Jordan Peterson, Professor of Psychology at the University of Toronto for Prager University.
I thought that was a
Thank you for watching this
pretty
video.
sound message. All right, any questions, comments?
How'd you get into the high diving?
What's that?
How'd you get into high diving?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's a good question. I used to dive at UMSL, and I was a national qualifier there, and then they hired me as a coach, which was kind of nice. I was in optometry school, and I was coaching the divers at UMSL and Washington University. They brought their divers up. And so I couldn't compete anymore on an amateur, my eligibility was spent. And I got a phone call from an old friend who said, hey, we need a diver on the team down, so I went down to check it out. And it was kind of, and Sue knows, it was an interesting transition because I went from springboard diving in college to doing clown diving and fire diving down at the Six Flags. So I had to learn a whole new ballgame. But we had a great time. And I did that 2 or 3 summers. And then I got a job related to my field at an ophthalmology office, and I left the diving show. Interesting thing was, the friend that I recruited to take my place in that show, when he went, they brought in the dolphins. I wish I had been there when they had the dolphins. Now, that meant saltwater. They were, which was, they had to dive into saltwater, but they got to play with the dolphins in between diving shows, which I thought was pretty cool. But it was a good experience, and I got to work with some really good people. And that's another example, as far as character development. I was working with 2 or 3 guys down there that were veteran high divers from Acapulco. They dove for the U.S. high diving team on NBC. I mean, they were experienced guys, and they'd been around the block, and they traveled, and just spending time with them stretched me, That's why I look at things like that, even though it seemed like a silly job. It had its purpose. You know, it had its part. Everything you do has the potential to make you bigger and more valuable. Yeah, even things like that. So, well, that's all I have. I'm going to leave these copies up here for you. So there's 2 copies here, one of which has a book list on one side, desirable life attributes on the other. And these are from students, actually. I thought they were good. And then this is just a summary of my lecture notes. So the scriptures and the quotes are on here if you want to keep them for your own notes, okay?
I think you had another question back there.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, are you planning on teaching that class again, the do hard things?
Yeah, I teach that class in the fall semester, and it's a fun class. It requires some reading, but not a lot. And the primary exercise in that class is that for a lot of students, it's an exercise in reading the material, pulling out the key points, and then putting them in their own words, paraphrasing in short essay answers. So it's a real good exercise in reading and writing, you know, for people that are kind of breaking into that.
Okay,
Yeah, but that's available this fall.
awesome, thank you.
That's it. Thank you, Ava. Thanks for the opportunity.